She collapsed before the tiny grave, broken by loss, her child taken by the storm, declared dead by all.
No one searched. No one stayed.
But far beyond the wreckage, a lone human had heard the child's cry beneath the rubble, and refused to walk away. While others mourned, he fought, through fire, storm, and ruin, to bring that child back. Now, as the mother grieves over an empty grave, footsteps approach, and in his arms a miracle.
Her child, alive.
And her life, about to change forever. The wind screamed across the valley, howling through the charred remains of the once proud village of Sarajevo. Blackened trees jutted out of the ground like twisted spears. The storm had come without warning, an unnatural maelstrom born from atmospheric instability after the mining operations on the nearby moon ruptured something deep beneath the crust. What it unleashed had been no ordinary weather system, it had been a wrath.
A punishment. Buildings collapsed.
Rivers flooded with toxic ash. Homes buried in sliding rock and debris. And lives, so many lives, swept away in moments. Among the countless devastated, one figure knelt alone at the edge of a shallow grave, her body hunched forward, shoulders trembling beneath a layer of damp, soot-streaked cloth. Esri's long limbs were usually strong, elegant even with the grace common to her people, but today they curled inwards like wilted branches. Her hands were caked in soil, her nails cracked and bleeding from clawing at the mud to dig.
No tools. No rights.
Just a hole she had made with desperate hands. The shape wrapped in her torn shawl within it, small, still, far too light, was her daughter.
Lyra.
The only light left in her world.
Or so she believed.
She hadn't meant to leave her. But when the storm came, the sky turning to fire and the earth to quicksand, Esri had only one thought: run. Hold Lyra tight, flee to the upper ridge. But the bridge had collapsed. The wind knocked her from the rocks, and she tumbled, blacked out. When she awoke hours later, face buried in a mix of ash and gravel, Lyra was gone.
Gone.
It took her 2 days of tearing through the ruined village, screaming her daughter's name, before she found the bloodied piece of fabric, Lyra's favorite blanket, wedged beneath a beam. Beneath it, the broken remains of a support wall.
And the smell.
She never stopped screaming. Now, 4 days later, the funeral was just her. No priest, no family, no offerings. Just Esri and the wind, and the ache that would never leave. I should have held you tighter, she whispered, voice cracking. I should have carried you farther, I should have. Her breath hitched. Her chest caved inward as she leaned over the grave.
I'm so sorry.
Mama's so sorry. She sobbed, great, broken sounds that didn't belong to a warrior's widow or a noble-blooded refugee. They belonged to a mother who had nothing left. And she wept long after her body should have stopped. But far beyond the edge of the scorched valley, down the fractured slope and through the collapsed mines, another sound echoed, a human voice, coarse and urgent, cursing through grit and darkness. Come on, stay with me, little one, just breathe, just hold on. His name was Jared Cole, former Earth Coalition engineer, now working freelance recovery in disaster zones the officials wouldn't touch. He hadn't meant to be here. His crew was supposed to be tracking radiation zones on the other side of the moon, but when he caught the emergency beacon's stray ping in an abandoned frequency, he investigated anyway. The signal had led him to a collapsed mining entrance, partially buried under slag and waste rock. No life signs, no movement, but then faint.
So faint. A single heat trace.
Something alive. He'd spent 14 straight hours digging with only a plasma cutter and a half-dead loader unit. His fingers bled through the gloves. His respirator cracked once, exposing him to the metallic air.
He didn't care.
Because when he finally broke through, when he saw the tiny bundle, curled between fractured pipes and ductwork, wrapped in a scorched blanket, he thought for a second he was too late.
But then, movement. Her hand twitched.
You're alive, oh hell, you're actually alive, she was barely breathing.
No water. No food.
Weak, dehydrated, bruised, and trembling. But alive. And she didn't cry when he lifted her, just blinked up at him with large golden eyes and a dazed expression that split his heart wide open. Back aboard his skiff, he did what he could: fluids, heat, oxygen. The emergency AI confirmed she was stabilizing. He didn't ask himself why he'd done it. He didn't ask where her people were. All he knew was that someone still had to be looking for her. Someone had to care. No child that strong fought to survive just to be abandoned. Her name, he learned later, was Lyra. It was stitched into the corner of her blanket.
Not a serial number. Not a slave tag.
Just a name, lovingly sewn in by hand. Back at the grave site, Esri finally collapsed beside the earth she had shoveled. Exhaustion took her, not sleep, her body simply gave out. She didn't notice the small recon drone as it drifted overhead, scanning terrain and life signs. She didn't see the tiny red dot pause on her form, flag her biological match to the child stowed safely aboard a nearby rescue vessel, Jared's vessel, parked behind a canyon wall half a mile down. Jared was pacing when the AI pinged him. Identify match, maternal DNA, 99.87% certainty.
He stopped. What?
He stared at the display.
You found her.
The AI confirmed. Life signs, weak but stable. Emotional stress indicators off the charts. The scan showed her collapsed near a freshly disturbed burial mound.
His stomach turned.
She thought the kid was dead, he muttered. She buried her thinking she didn't make it. He looked down at Lyra, sleeping beside the heater unit. She was still too weak to move, her breathing shallow but steady. He couldn't just leave her here.
But he couldn't wait.
If her mother gave up now. He lifted Lyra gently, bundling her in the emergency wrap. She stirred, little fingers curling around his shirt. We're gonna go find Mama, kiddo, he whispered. Let's bring her back from the edge. When Esri awoke, the sun was lower, burnt orange over the canyon rim.
Her body ached. Her throat felt like sand. She didn't want to move.
But something in the air felt different.
She sat up slowly.
A shadow approached from the ridge, a figure moving carefully.
Not large. Not threatening. Human. Male.
Cradling something.
She blinked, rubbed her eyes, stood.
And then she saw the blanket.
Her breath caught. It couldn't be.
But then, he stepped into full light, and in his arms was the impossible.
Lyra. Alive. Weak, but eyes open. Looking straight at her.
Esri screamed, not in fear, but in a choked, broken sound of disbelief. She staggered forward, hands trembling. Jared slowed, kneeling as he set the child down gently on the grass between them. She's safe, he said softly. I found her in the old mine.
She held on. Esri dropped to her knees.
Her arms shook as she reached forward, not daring to hope, until Lyra blinked again and lifted one tiny hand.
Mama. She wept.
But not with grief this time. This was something else, something holy. She pulled her daughter into her arms, holding her so tightly it seemed she'd never let go. Lyra whimpered against her chest, but didn't cry. Just burrowed in deeper. Jared stepped back, giving them space. He'd seen joy before, but nothing like this. Nothing so raw. So alive. When Esri finally looked up, her face wet, streaked with ashen tears, she asked only one question.
Why? He met her eyes.
Because no one else did. And she deserved to be saved. She stared at him for a long time, like seeing a creature she'd never believed existed.
Then, finally, she nodded. And whispered, "Thank you."
The sun dipped low over the scarred ridge, casting long shadows over the valley where ruins still whispered of a civilization nearly wiped away. Esri sat in stunned silence, her arms wrapped tightly around Lyra, who clung to her mother like the small roots of a tree trying to return to the earth. Jared stood a respectful distance away, not wanting to intrude on the reunion, though every part of him felt drawn to stay, anchored by something deeper than duty. The woman had not stopped trembling since the moment she'd laid eyes on her daughter again. It wasn't shock anymore, it was disbelief unraveling into awe. Her child had returned from a grave she herself had buried. What force in the galaxy could make sense of that? What power, other than love and sheer, stubborn will? Lyra fell asleep in her mother's arms not long after, her frail body finally surrendering to exhaustion. Esri kept her wrapped tightly in the cloak Jared had given her, refusing to set her down. Jared approached slowly, crouching nearby. There's a thermal shelter not far from here, he said, voice low. It's safer than staying out in the open tonight. Cold's gonna set in soon. Esri didn't move for a moment, then finally nodded.
Help me, she whispered.
Her knees buckled as she rose. Jared stepped in, carefully supporting her with one arm while she kept Lyra close with the other. Together they walked, stumbling slow, but moving forward. The shelter was a temporary outpost, one of Jared's old recon units retooled for humanitarian aid. Inside, it was modest, heated panels, medical supplies, a fold-out bed, and an auto-nutrition dispenser barely clinging to life. Esri placed Lyra down gently and brushed a few strands of white blonde hair from her daughter's cheeks. The girl murmured in her sleep, curling toward the warmth of the bed's plasma cushion. Esri stood beside her, unmoving. Jared watched her quietly, his gear half removed, hands still stained from the dig. He didn't know what to say to a woman who had buried her child, only to have her handed back from the abyss. After a long silence, she finally turned to him. Your kind never comes here, she said. Her voice was no longer brittle, it was sharp now, probing.
You're human.
The others wouldn't even search. They called this zone irrecoverable. What made you care? Jared took a long breath, leaning against the frame of the shelter's entrance. I lost my little sister when I was 10, he said.
House fire. I couldn't get to her.
I still hear her screaming when I sleep.
He glanced toward Lyra.
When I saw that signal, when I heard a faint heat signature in the rubble, I told myself it couldn't be a person. But then I thought, what if it was someone's sister? Someone's daughter?
His voice dropped.
I couldn't leave her there.
Esri studied him.
And you risked your life, for a child that wasn't even yours? Jared gave a small, tired laugh. I don't think love works that way. Doesn't matter where someone's from. Doesn't matter if they've got scales or feathers or skin.
A child's a child. He paused.
And I couldn't live with myself if I didn't try. Something changed in Esri's face then, not softening exactly, but unfolding.
A mask slipping away.
She walked to him slowly, then bowed her head, not deeply, not ceremonially, but something real. You gave me back my life, she said. I thought it had ended. I thought I'd buried my heart. She raised her eyes to his. But you handed it back to me. The next days passed slowly. Lyra's strength returned in increments. Jared kept her warm, hydrated, and fed, checking vitals regularly. She began speaking more, quiet words in her native tongue, eventually mingled with broken Galactic standard. She liked to hold Jared's finger when she fell asleep. Esri barely left her daughter's side, but when she did, it was to help Jared. She repaired panels, recalibrated the auto-nutrition settings, even reset the oxygen filters.
She was skilled.
Jared noticed how her hands moved with precision, how her eyes scanned circuitry with trained understanding. You were an engineer? He asked one evening.
Esri nodded. Before the war, yes. Before the Empire fell. Before all this.
She gestured to the ruined landscape outside. They spoke more in the evenings, after Lyra fell asleep. Shared bits of life, small fragments. Jared told her about Earth's overcrowded cities and cold officials who refused to send aid unless a planet had value. Esri spoke of the old moons, the crystalline lakes of her homeland, now dust and crater. Slowly, space narrowed between them, not in distance, but in understanding. The silence became less hollow, more shared. One night, Esri sat across from him, watching as he poured hot rehydrated broth into 2 small metal cups. Her eyes followed the steam curling between them. You're not like the others, she said. Jared shrugged. I'm just a guy trying to fix what I can. Esri tilted her head. Most humans don't even look at us twice. Jared stirred his drink, then met her gaze. That's their loss. She studied him a long moment, then said quietly, You never asked what I was. I figured you'd tell me when you wanted to. I was nobility, technically. I carried rank. My mate was a soldier. He died trying to hold the coast when the floods hit.
Her expression darkened.
The other clans turned their backs.
No status. No protection. Just pity. And then silence. Jared's jaw tensed.
They let you fend for yourself? They let us die.
Silence.
She glanced toward the sleeping form of her daughter. I thought Lyra's death was punishment, for my failure to protect her. I buried her with my own hands. There is no deeper damnation. Her voice broke at the end. Jared reached out, placing his hand over hers. There's no damnation in doing your best to survive. Esri didn't move.
But she didn't pull away.
That night, after Lyra was safely tucked beneath a warming mesh, Esri stood by the shelter's narrow window, watching starlight flicker across the distant ridges. Jared approached quietly, his footsteps soft. You're leaving, aren't you? She asked. Jared nodded slowly. There's another distress call.
Sector 9.
Civilians stranded after a failed jump drive. I can't ignore it. Esri turned toward him, eyes unreadable. And what happens to us?
Jared's voice caught.
You come with me. The words hung in the air like gravity had thinned. Esri blinked.
What? You and Lyra. Come with me.
I've got access to coalition medcare, food, housing.
It's not much.
But it's better than this. She looked torn, eyes flickering between fear and longing.
And what would we be? Refugees?
Charity. Jared stepped closer.
No. You'd be safe. You'd be home.
Esri's breath caught in her throat.
Why?
Because no one else ever did. And because you matter. He reached out slowly, brushing a strand of silver from her cheek.
Both of you. That night, she didn't answer him. But she didn't say no.
When morning came, she was already awake, bags packed. Lyra stood beside her, one small hand gripping her mother's long fingers, the other already reaching for Jared. They lifted off at dawn. As the ship broke atmosphere, Esri stared through the viewport at the valley vanishing below. The grave still lay there.
Empty now.
But it no longer held her heart. It no longer chained her soul. 2 weeks later, in the clean corridors of the Refugee Integration Center on Ganymede Station, Lyra played quietly with a soft Terran toy while Esri completed identity reinstatement protocols. Jared stood nearby, arms crossed, his presence steady. The officials reviewed everything: medical clearance, planetary status, familial verification. You are eligible for full residential sponsorship under Article 6, the intake officer said, tapping the tablet. Mr. Cole has submitted formal petition for guardianship bond extension, one rarely used. Esri blinked. What does that mean? Jared cleared his throat.
It means,
I want to help you start again.
for real.
Not just as a rescue, but as family. Esri said nothing for a long time. Then, without ceremony, she stepped close, pressed her forehead to his and whispered, You already are.